Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the First Canada STEMathon, Girls and Allies 2022. This is the third STEMathon we've put on, and we are so excited to be here for an exciting 24 hours of STEM fun. This event is sponsored by Enbridge Gas, Magna, Rockwell Automation, and it is going to be a blast. I'm your co-host today, Karthik Kanagasabapathi, and I've been waiting for this for a long time. STEMathon's become one of my favorite first events across everything. That includes like our in-person big robot events, because there's just a certain dynamism to this event and energy and learning, and just fun to see people collaborate from across the country. Just get us started. As Canadians, it is important to recognize the land of which we are a part. As we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually constructed, let us take a moment to reflect upon the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we celebrate today. We acknowledge the elders and youth, past, present, and emerging, of all land on which we work and live. We honor the ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect. We acknowledge this land out of respect for the Indigenous nations who have cared for Turtle Island, also called North America. The Indigenous people have been gifted the role of caretakers of this land from before the arrival of settler peoples until today. But most importantly, we must remember the history of these lands and people that have been tainted by poor treatment and a lack of friendship with the First Nations who called Canada home before it was given this name. This history is something that everyone is affected by. We are all treaty people in Canada. We all have a shared history to reflect upon, and each of us is affected by this history in different ways. Our past defines our present, but if we move forward as friends and allies, it does not define our future. Now, folks, to get us started, I'd like to introduce our co-host for this event. She's a First Canada alum, hackathon expert, and multi-scholarship winner, Mahak Dhaliwal. Hello, Mahak. Mahakathon, you're back.
Damn it, I knew that was going to come somewhere in here, but hi, everyone.
It's the best nickname. It definitely stuck. Mahak, you've been a part of this event since the very beginning. In fact, you were one of the inspirations and sources of the idea for running a STEMathon, combining a traditional hackathon with what happens at first. You were a high school student then. Now you are. Tell us about where you're at now.
Yeah, now I'm a first year university student at the University of Waterloo studying system design engineering. So it's definitely very, very interesting thinking about, like, last year I was in grade 12, very uncertain about what was going to happen, but yeah, super excited to be a part of the STEMathon for its third year.
And Mahak, like, a lot of what you do in systems design engineering does kind of resemble some of the activities in a STEMathon, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think the STEMathon is just a much scaled down version, and it's under 24 hours. But I think a lot of the experiences that our participants are going to go over for the next day, with like the design thinking process, coming up with an idea, looking at its like viability, and then based on all of our awesome presenters, figuring out how they can approach their idea. I think that's also what we do in system design, and even like some of my design courses. So I feel like maybe I kind of have an upper hand because I did first in high school, and then also was able to experience the STEMathon. That like it feels very familiar being in those design courses and going through that process.
I know you have an upper hand having done first, because we see the amazing things that first students do in post-secondary education. It's very, very cool. So, we talked a little bit about what a STEMathon is, but for those of you who don't know, it's not a hackathon, it's a STEMathon, because it's not just code focused. Teams are working on real world solutions to solve a big problem. And we're going to talk about the theme later on. And that's really, really exciting. But you can come up with a physical solution. It could be a code-based solution. It could be an app. It could be pedagogy, it could be curriculum. There's all sorts of ideas, but basically we're going to present a problem for you, and you have 24 hours to come up with some sort of solution. And we've seen some really unique things over the years, and I can't wait to see what teams come up with first. But it's your problem solving, creating an innovative solution through the application of STEM, and STEM kind of runs through everything we do. And people talk a little bit about STEM problem solving, but I kind of think that STEM problem solving is problem solving, because problem solving requires elements of all these different disciplines. And then once you've got your solution done, you're going to be presenting to our judges tomorrow morning. That's right, tomorrow morning started at 8:30, so like time's just going to fly. You'll be presenting the solution. You got to sell it to the judges and explain why your solution makes sense, why it's going to solve a big problem, and why it's the best and deserves the awards. And in addition to that, you've got to make an infographic kind of giving the visual presentation of it. So there's like the spoken presentation and the visual presentation. So there's a lot that's happening in this event. It's going to be really fun, but you have some great mentors who will be helping you along the way. There's there's so much happening. And heck, we've got a couple presentations today to help the teams get ready and to develop their solutions and to develop their presentations, right?
Yes, so we have some really cool and super awesome presentations. We have a design presentation by Lisa, and then also a pitch and presentation by Celeste. So they're two very awesome experts in their fields, but I think especially if this is either your first STEMathon or if you've been with us for the past 3 years, these presentations are a really awesome way to get like started and sort of to understand where to start and how to go from there. And in general, I feel like I use Lisa's presentation or what I learned from it a lot, even in my design course at university or in other projects that I work on. So super helpful and super awesome presentations.
Colette's presentation is, in my opinion, one of the best presentations I've ever
Mhm.
seen on how to give a pitch. It is so good, and it's so cool to have like an expert at pitching who's gotten venture capital support before doing one of those for us today. So this is great to have some of our first alumni and first staff helping out with all of this. And you know, Mahak, it would not be a First Canada event if there wasn't some swag available. And you know, we have some swag as prizes, but also every single attendee of the STEMathon is going to be sent some First Canada swag. We'll surprise you with what that's going to be. But from the legend himself, Mr. Swag EP, Paul Keenan. And we got some swag prizes for the various games that'll be played on Sunday. Because yeah, we got like a game session. You know, when you're done your judging session, you're looking for something to do, jump in on Zoom and there'll be games played with some prizes. There's some trivia, some Gartic phone, some virtual breakout rooms. It'll be really good. And there's a gracious professionalism award too. So there's lots happening. But Mahak, there's also big prizes for our winners here this weekend, right?
They are some really cool and really awesome prizes. I am so jealous that I feel like I should have competed in the STEMathon if I could win these prizes. But some of the prizes that we have for best pitch, it's the Fujifilm Instax Mini 11 camera. So that's really exciting. And then we also have a Fitbit Charger 4s for best project. And for best overall, we have HP Chromebooks. So that is going to be super awesome. We got decked out with all of the awesome swag, especially thanks to our amazing sponsors, TD and Cinex.
So for if you win, if your team wins best overall, every single member of the team is getting a brand new laptop, an HP Chromebook. That is so
That's great.
sweet. That is, you know, this is big time here at the STEMathon. This is really cool. So the goal of this event is to provide an engaging, interactive online opportunity for young women in STEM and their allies to problem solve, collaborate on teams, and open minds to new opportunities. You think about the excitement, and I know about 2/3 of our participants this weekend, Mahak, have been on an FRC team already, but we've got a third who haven't. But really, you know, what the STEMathon does to a certain degree, it distills what happens in the process of designing and building a robot that our teams are used to doing over, you know, a 6-week span or 6 weeks and longer now as it goes into competitions. And we're compressing that into 24 hours. So it's like this super concentrated version of the first experience. And it's going to be really neat. But one of the unique things about this event and about First in general, like if you think about the coolest thing about First, in my opinion, I know it's what got me to where I am, it was the inspiration that was provided to me by the mentors I had. And the STEMathon is very similar to that, where we have experienced mentors who are all first alumni and volunteers. So we have 16 of the most impressive first alums and volunteers from not just in Canada. We got a NASA rocket scientist here. It is pretty dope. So let's meet our 16 mentors who will be available all weekend to support, encourage, and advise the teams. Angela Tolis and Erica Rossi. Gabby Genero, Jay Warham. Jenna K. Porsche, and Jessica Kelso. Oh, that's me, and Laura Lee. Lisa Ramraj and Marie Jolakor-Bacot. Megan McEwen and Namira Kodir. Namira coming in all the way from Harvard. Nikita Jossingani and Sarah Alderson. And rounding us out, Sarah Arnold and Cindy Lamoria. So it is really cool. And teams, we really encourage you because each team has a mentor. But remember, as part of the rules this year, your project, you must consult with another mentor. And you might be wondering, well, which mentor should I reach out to? If you take a look at your student handbook in Notion, it's got a list of all the mentors' bios and all the different skills that they have. So it'll be really helpful in figuring out who you need to talk to. And the mentors will be active in Slack, reaching out. So just kind of use Slack super interactively, pay attention to the bios the mentors are dropping, and just don't be afraid to reach out. And if you need to be connected to a specific mentor, one of the planning committee members can help you do that, or your own team mentor can do that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And Mahak, we've got judges too, right?
Yes, so we have a really amazing judges panel that is going to be judging all the projects that everyone is doing. And I'm honestly really excited to see, because I know our judges have a lot of awesome industry experience, and they come from so many different perspectives that their take on a lot of the projects, it's going to be super awesome. And I'm actually really excited that the judges firsthand get to see all the teams present. So that's gonna be super cool.
And all of our judges, like our mentors, are alumni as well. So it's they've been in your shoes before. So our judges are Shelby Servant from 3M and Shifa Abbas from the Decolonized Library Project, and our judge advisor, Jaylene Koshelski. Throughout the show today, because we're going to be jumping into presentations and some guest speakers, but if you have any questions, post them in the Twitch chat and we'll try and answer them live on air. But before we do that, let's take a look at a word from one of our sponsors, Enbridge.
We are Enbridge, and we deliver the energy that fuels quality of life. We connect North America's rich energy supply with communities across the continent and beyond. We are resilient and innovative, delivering the energy mix of today and tomorrow. Our approach has evolved, grounded in respect for people and the environment. We listen and act, and we build strong partnerships with communities based on inclusion and respect. Above all, we aim to make a difference, economically and socially. Because life takes energy, and we deliver it.
All right, we're back, and Mahak, we're going to introduce our first guest speaker, and it's a good one. It's as big as it gets. This next guest speaker has been involved with FIRST for over 20 years now. She is the chair of the FIRST Canada Board of Directors, Dorothy Byers. Welcome, Dorothy.
Hey, Karthik, great to see you this morning, and absolutely fabulous to be here. So thanks for the very kind welcome. And it's a spectacular spring, almost summer day out there. So what a great day to be able to spend stretching your STEM skills. I can't even think of anything I'd rather do. So as Karthik mentioned, I'm Dorothy Byers, and I have been involved in FIRST for about 20 years. And I'm thrilled to bits to be the chair of the board of such an outstanding organization. And I'm really, really thrilled to be with you in person as it stands this morning. So thanks a bunch for the invite. I understand that about 75% of our participants today identify as girls, so welcome to you, and about 25% identify as boys. And you're going to hear us talk a lot about girls and allies who are confronting the challenges of equity, diversity, and inclusion in STEM fields. As we know, diversity of thought and experience are the best way to solve challenges. So having a diverse team is really important, and making sure that everyone feels included is equally as important. I also understand that some of you are brand new to FIRST, so welcome to you, and enjoy this little taste of what FIRST is all about. We really hope to see you again at one of our programs. FIRST opens doors that you didn't even know existed. So have fun and learn as much as you can. You're going to be stretching your creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, artistic, oral, teamwork skills as you work to solve this year's challenge, which will be revealed at noon, as Karthik mentioned. Revel in the challenge of solving the issue. You can change the world. And of course, as the TV icon of children's programming, Mr. Rogers said, always look for the helpers. And you have many helpers here. A shout out to all the youth alumni mentors and the first staff who are here to support you today and tomorrow. They are an amazing group who have incredible experiences, and they excel you and they want you to be the best that you possibly can be. Use their expertise and learn as much as you can from them and each other. I'd also like to acknowledge the incredible production team that you have today. Some of them you are seeing in front of you, and some of them are behind the scenes. So thanks everybody for making this STEMathon be what it is. So listen, best wishes for a great, great weekend. Stretch all your skills. There's a bit of a theme here. Enjoy everything that you're learning and everything that you're doing. Have fun and be proud of what you accomplish. And I hope that we will see you again at another first event. Have a super weekend, folks. Thanks, Karthik.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thanks for being here, and thanks for that amazing message to all our participants to kick us off this morning. And we're going to get started with all our presentations coming up, but we'll be back in just a couple seconds. All right, Mahek, are you ready to learn how to brainstorm and design?
I am so ready. Super excited.
I want to say this is that, I think all of us, you start doing brainstorming and design stuff, like really, really wrong. And everyone kind of thinks they kind of know what they're doing. But presentations like this one that we're going to see are just such a good grounding influence. It's like, oh yeah, I haven't thought of things that way. And just kind of looking at the big picture. So I'm really excited to get a big picture look at brainstorming design from rather than our next guest, who is a First Canada alum, mechanical engineering graduate from the University of Waterloo. Oh, it's like Waterloo all over here, all three of us. First Canada.
Water.
Lou. For our First Canada First Tech Challenge Program Manager, Lisa Ramraj. Hello, Lisa.
Hello.
So how excited are you? Because I know like you especially love the STEMathon, right?
Yes, I am so excited to work with all of these amazing students and the mentors and see what everyone comes up with for this year's challenge. This is the first time I actually know the theme before doing this presentation, and I'm so excited to see what everyone comes up with.
But we can't tell anyone the theme yet, Lisa. It's got to keep
yet.
it on the got to keep it on the DL for now, at least until like around 11:30 ish or whatever.
Yeah.
But Lisa, before you get started on your presentation, I want to know, what's your favorite part of this event?
My favorite part is like getting to jump into the different teams' calls to hear like their thought process behind their solution. Because just like in first, everyone's given the same theme, everyone's given the same kind of like the same game and concept. And it's so interesting to see what different avenues that teams take. That's the best part for me.
Yeah, I think it's the creativity of design. And for me, it's always just been this like whoa moments of, I would not have approached this way. And just that, it's when you bring together a bunch of talented people and give them a problem to solve, it's really amazing to see what people come up with. And that's kind of, when we do robots, it's amazing because we see like all sorts of different type, teams are given a game challenge and then suddenly a jumping robot shows up and, we all go wild for that. But with the STEMathon, with the theme, it's much broader. And so you see just this wide array. So it's really, really neat. But enough from me and Mahak. Lisa, take it away with your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you. So like Karthik said, I will be talking about brainstorming and design tips. We'll go to the next. Quick introduction, even though Karthik pretty much said everything. My name is Lisa Ramraj. I studied mechanical engineering at the University of Waterloo. I did FRC for 13 years, 4 as a student and the rest of as a mentor, all on Team 1310 Runnymede Robotics. After graduating university, I worked as a sales and product engineer at a company called Clear Blue Technologies, where we made smart controllers to power off-grid tech. And I currently have the privilege of working at First Robotics Canada as the First Tech Challenge Program Manager, where I get to facilitate the FTC program in Ontario and help give students the same robotics experience that changed my life. As you can probably tell from like the background, my favorite animal is a bear, specifically polar bear. And my favorite color is red, as you can tell by my hair. So this is an overview of the engineering design process. I want to emphasize something right off the bat, that this process is not set in stone. It's not something where you have to follow these exact steps in the specific order and check them off as you go, and then you're done and it's perfect. This is a great starting point, and it's a great thing to refer to when you're in the process of designing. The steps are as follows: define the problem, research, requirements and criteria, brainstorming, proof of concept or prototype, evaluate, and final solution. So we'll go to the first step, which is first and foremost, you have to define the problem. I always do that. What is the actual problem that you are trying to address? Try to focus on the root cause of the problem and not the symptoms. For example, let's say I've been feeling extremely tired in the morning all week, and I end up thinking that what I need to do is start drinking stronger coffee in the morning, rather than actually addressing the root cause of the problem, which is that I'm just scrolling through Instagram until 2 a.m. every night. There are different types of questions that you can ask yourself to try to hone in on the problem. Some strategic questions are, what are you trying to get to? What is stopping you from getting there? Some analytical questions are, where does this problem come from? And why are things the way they are? Some implicative questions can be, what groups of people are affected by this? And what impact could addressing this specific thing have on other areas? Very soon, this year's STEMathon theme will be revealed. When you meet with your group, start by discussing the first thing that came to mind when you heard about the theme, and ask yourself some of these questions to hone in on a problem that your team wants to address. Remember, the theme is broad on purpose. It is perfectly fine to focus on a specific thing that is related to it. The more specific your definition of the problem is, the easier brainstorming solutions will be. Next up is research. Look at examples. The internet is a beautiful thing. We have access to so much information. Look at how different industries have addressed the same problem. What do their solutions do well? What could they do better? In robotics, we have different types of shooters and different styles of intakes. When it comes to shooters, there are tons of examples online. After 20 plus years of FRC, we have shot balls of different sizes and textures. We've even shot frisbees, and some of us have even shot cubes. The same thing goes for intakes. You have over the bumper, within the bumper, single versus multi-game piece intakes. There are so many examples from different teams from different years. You can analyze what their situation was and how that situation is similar or different than yours, and you can iterate on their solutions. A real-world example of this would be like a company trying to make a training course for their employees. They could look at how universities do their courses, or how transatlantic companies host meetings around the world. They could honestly also ask all of your opinions on what works and what doesn't, because let's be real, you've been doing training sessions and learning online for a couple of years now. So you should be the expert at this point. So now we jump into requirements and criteria. Once you've done your research, it's time to identify these two things. Requirements are things that the design must meet or it fails. And criteria are scalable values that are used to compare ideas. Some examples are cost, manufacturability, accessibility, and required training. In robots, an example would be having a requirement that a robot needs to shoot 3 balls in 3 seconds. A corresponding criteria to that could be ball scoring rate, where faster is better. When evaluating your shooter ideas later on, You would give each design a rating in that category, and the fastest one would get the highest rating. Now for the fun part, brainstorming. Focus on your requirements and criteria, but hear everyone out. Do not leave anything out at this point and put all the ideas on the table. You don't want to eliminate any ideas too early. Maybe someone comes up with something that addresses one part of the problem, and a little later, someone thinks of something that addresses a completely different part. You don't want to dismiss either idea right off the bat, because maybe you can put them together and come up with a really great solution. After giving yourselves a good amount of time to throw ideas at the wall, look at your ideas and figure out which ones you want to explore a little bit further. Now we have come to the proof of concept or prototyping stage. I will be the first to admit that I've definitely used the word prototype when I've actually meant proof of concept. So what's the actual difference? A proof of concept is done on a small scale. The whole point of it is to show that the product or feature can be developed. It's used to verify the functionality of the product or feature, and you can use whatever you have on hand to do this. A prototype, on the other hand, is a to-scale model with the ability to adjust variables. It has almost all the functionalities of the final product, and it is used to test against your variables. For a prototype, you really want to use materials that are close to what you intend to use for the final product. Since this is the 24-hour challenge, you will likely be making a proof of concept rather than a prototype. For software, you could use something like a notebook where you can do small blocks of code where you can get an output quickly and test theories. If you come up with a physical product, you can use any materials that you have on hand that will hold up to whatever tests or mockups you want to do. Be cautious of overly prototyping. You only want to prototype items that you absolutely need to. For example, let's say you want to figure out if 6-inch Coulson wheels are okay to use for the game this year and that they can deal with the field elements perfectly fine. Rather than building an entire powered drivetrain prototype that you can control with an Xbox controller, you can put 4 pieces of 2x4 together, have places to secure the wheels on them, and push it over the field elements to see how they interact. You will get the information that you needed in significantly less time. So now we're going to have a look at a few examples. So on the left, we have a software example of a proof of concept from the 2019 FRC game. Here, we wanted to see if it was possible to use the data points that we collected in match scouting to draw out how a team liked to drive in a match. And on top of that, we wanted to see if this map would give us any useful information. The thicker the line, the more often that path was used. On the left, you can see that 1310 liked to score on the sides of the cargo ship. But we didn't really have a preference on which side because you can see that we have thick lines all over the map. But on the right, 5406 clearly liked to do the rocket more than the cargo ship, and they preferred the right side of the field. So now we knew that we could do it, and we knew that it could give us useful information. On the right-hand side, we have a shooter prototype from the 2020 game. We made this prototype with 3 different gear ratios and a variable hood, so we could vary the speed and the angle of the shot in order to meet our requirements of being able to do a far shot and a closer up shot. The sides of this prototype were cut out of hardboard rather than plexi because it was super fast to cut on the router, and that we wouldn't be wasting plexi if we needed to make any changes before the final version. Next up, we have an example of going from a proof of concept to a prototype. On the left, we used 2 pieces of hex shaft, lots of wooden clamps to determine if the geometry would work to pick up balls from the ground or from the human player station. Then the design was CAD'd. We figured out how to articulate it using pneumatics, and built a working prototype to test it on a moving base. During these tests, we realized that we needed a third roller to keep the balls from popping out to meet our requirement of holding 5 balls at all times. Next. Now that you have your proof of concept or prototypes, it's time to evaluate them to see which idea will work best for your project. When evaluating, make sure you're comparing apples to apples. So proof of concept to proof of concept or prototype versus prototype. Like I said before, you're going to evaluate these based on your criteria, but some of your criteria will matter more to you than others. To account for that, we give each criteria a weight out of 100. So in my table, cost is the most important thing to me, so I gave it a weight of 40. And required training is the least important criteria to me, so I gave it a weight of 10. Now we put everything in a table. Next slide. Thank you. All of the ideas are across the top and all the criteria is along the side. For each criteria, I give each idea a score from 1 to 5, where 5 is the most desirable score. Then we multiply the score by how important that criteria is to me, the weight. And then we sum up each column. The column with the highest sum is the idea that will give you the best combination of your criteria. Next slide. And now you have your refined idea. So you can go ahead and create your final product. In the real world, there would be a final evaluation stage or many of those stages before the product gets mass produced. Run into an issue that you didn't predict? Brainstorm, do a proof of concept or prototype, make changes. It's a cycle. At some point though, usually dictated by time or money, you will have to go with what you have. Kind of like how it's a week before competition and you have to stop making design changes so that your drivers can practice with the hardware and software that you have to prepare for the event. Next slide. Now you have your final product. Keep learning from it and make it better. Test it in the real environment. Ask yourself, did it solve your problem? What does it do well? What could it do better? Make a plan and iterate. Next. Now we're at some key takeaways. Remember that your target demographic can be diverse in the following ways: age, life cycle stage, gender, economic background, religion, nationality. All of these differences can impact how the person in your target demographic interacts with your design. Remember to research existing solutions. Look up products or processes that exist in the field. What do they do well? What could they do better? Do other industries or corporations deal with the same problem? How do they address it? Look at what they've done, evaluate their situation and how it's similar or different than yours, and iterate on it. Next. Always revisit your requirements and constraints when making a design change. Ask yourself, are you still meeting the requirements? Is this potential design change worth modifying your requirements? Because sometimes it really is. And then, does the design still reasonably fall within your criteria if you do make the change? And last but not least, prototype, prototype, prototype. That sounds way better than saying proof of concept 3 times, but there's that too. Use whatever means you have. No matter how simple your proof of concept is, there's always going to be something that you can learn from it. When making decisions, evaluate how accurately your prototype or proof of concept represents the real deal, because you don't want to end up in a situation where you're making decisions based on something that didn't accurately represent how the actual finished product would perform in the field. And that's what I have for you today. I can't hear
I think
you.
Karthik
No,
I think you might be
no.
muted.
Am I unmuted now? Like,
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So I had like these really great revelations right there, but they're gone now, so I can't because I know I'm kidding. Lisa, fabulous presentation. Really informative as usual. But I have some questions because we're talking about criteria. So like how you're judging a prototype, how you're judging a concept, and in industry, and you and I have both been there. So often the driving criteria is cost.
Mhm.
And that's what you're taught in engineering school, you're taught in economic school, you're taught as a mathematician. It's you need to reduce cost, But cost, and I think this is a concept that gets lost a little bit. And it's actually taught in economics classes, but it seems like it doesn't trickle out. That cost isn't just measured in price. Cost, there are other sorts of costs. There's the concept of opportunity cost, as in it may cost X to do this, but what could I also be doing instead of doing this? That's the whole concept of opportunity cost, where you might say that if you're in a room of a bunch of people are meeting and they're trying to figure out some legal documents, you might say, okay, well, I want the fastest typer to type, but there's an opportunity cost to that because the fastest typer might also be the best lawyer in the room. And so then all of a sudden they aren't able to learn. So there's the opportunity cost, what's being given up there. But there's also another type of cost. It's the whole concept of externalities of how do we factor in that, yes, it costs, we can switch to a new process, but it's gonna, it's cheaper because instead of relying on renewable energies, we're just gonna rely on coal, and it's cheaper. But there's a cost to that. There's the externality of the impact on the environment. So how do we weigh those sorts of things into our decisions to make sure we're choosing the right options?
I was actually thinking about this as making this new matrix. And one of the things that came to mind, it wasn't necessarily environmental, but I was thinking about like, how do I put on this chart? How do I weigh like the concept of I want it to have a positive impact on the most amount of people? And then I realized that like I had accessibility in there. And it's like, I think the first step is you have to put it on the decision chart. Like it has to be for most, it has to be there and it has to have a value next to it. So like in this case, it would be like environmental impact. So like that would be a line right there. And if we want to say that it's equal to cost, then it's like cost would be like, let's say 20 and environmental impact would be 20, and like you'd switch out all your factors. But the first step is putting it on the chart. The second thing is being able to define it. So when I was looking at my chart, I was like, oh, I want to put in that I want to define accessibility as it can be accessed by the most amount of people. It can have the most positive impact on the most amount of people. That's a long sentence to put on that, but it's like what that made me think of is that while you have those headings there, you really have to define what those mean to you so that you actually can give them a proper score and a proper weight. So I think that has to do with like the background work that you have to do. But yeah, get it on the chart, get it right up there next to cost if it matters that much to you. We can't leave it in the background. We can't say, oh, we'll pick out of the solutions that we have, we'll pick the one that we'll consider environmental impact. We'll consider how much waste. It's like, no, it has to be in that decision-making space.
This is where like the confluence between sociology and societal impacts and math comes in, because a lot of people say, oh, you can't define these things, but you can. You just have to define them correctly. It's just that typically when people have defined environmental costs or the impact of ED&I initiatives, they've undervalued them. And we can look into these sorts of things where, you might say like, oh, well, I want this project to reach the most amount of people, but that might not be the right answer, because maybe it's, I want to reach the most amount, a diverse audience. And there may be a cost to not reaching a diverse audience. It may be to your company, and it may be societal as well, because you're then going to be perpetuating systems of inequity, which is a massive, massive cost to society as a whole. And that's another piece. It's not just about how much it costs your organization or how much money your organization is going to make. We have to factor in societal costs, because guess what? We are all in this together. And if we're only thinking about how much money we're going to make, that is not being responsible. That is not a 21st century solution. It's definitely not a 22nd century solution. Because guess what, folks? We're at the point where we need to start thinking about 22nd century solutions. We need to be forward thinking. So define things and then look at the impact beyond just what you're doing, whether it be environmental, whether it be social. And you can always put a formula to this sort of thing, because maybe it's like, yeah, I want the most number of viewers, but like you can set up a formula where it's like, if number of viewers in demographic group X is below 35% of that demographic group, it kills the whole thing. And you can write formulas this way. Math works this way. There is, so you can do these things, but you have to lay it out. You have to define it. And Mahak, this is some of the stuff that you talk about a little bit in systems design engineering, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was really refreshing to hear you talk about, like, both Lisa and then Karthik, like your comment about how there are so many other factors that I think we all don't consider. And I think that's why like these like brainstorming and this design process is really important, because I feel like if we take like maybe like the traditional brainstorming process that we learn in like elementary school and middle school, and not really go into detail about these all these other factors that contribute to this one decision that you're making, or this one product or process that you're choosing on, you're not able to really look at the entire scope. So I think like taking a step back and really understanding who it impacts, why it impacts them, and then also like putting away some of your own biases that might be in place of like maybe some parties that you might not consider, or some things that you particularly don't think about, and really trying to dig deep into like from a bird's eye view, I think is really important. And we talk a lot about that in system design, and even through certain things like creating like user personas to really understand who you're targeting, like your user, and figuring out and empathizing with them, because that's so important, and that's going to help you create the best product, process, or whatever you are to tackle their problem.
So teams out there, when you're working on your solutions this weekend, and you say, you watch this discussion, you're like, oh, that makes sense, but I don't really know how to implement it. Guess what? Lisa is one of the STEMathon mentors who will be available. I'll be available too. I'd ask your mentors about this sort of stuff, about like, hey, how do we make sure we're looking at the bigger picture and the bigger impact? Because it matters for the real world. And guess what? It matters for the STEMathon, because I know our judges are going to be looking at that too. So make sure you're not just thinking it's like, oh, this will, and I find that it's cool doing a STEMathon with young people, because young people tend to have a more idealized version of the world, and they aren't in the, because I know when I was in high school doing sort of this stuff, I did, I just kind of saw like, yeah, I want to make the world a better place. It's once you get into the corporate world, they start beating into you. You have to make the most amount of money, and you need to shave costs by 3/4 of a cent. If you don't save 3/4 of a cent, it's like you get this nonsense or whatever, or like it's like, how much money out of your pocket would you be willing to pay for this, for this anti-racism initiative or whatever? It's like, why am I paying it out of my pocket? We have a giant company here that can pay for this, but that was always the stupidest line. How much of your money would you spend on this? It's like, shut up. I don't get it. Okay, we're just gonna go off topic here, but it's fine.
A quick thing.
Yeah.
I really wanted to touch on Mahek saying the user persona thing, because it made me think of one time when we had one of these events in person, a similar event in person. And the first step that we did was we created a user persona. We decided who we were gonna focus on. And what was really interesting was that really helped us help the groups hone in on their solution. But it also brought something else to the forefront, that having a diverse group of people in that decision-making space is so important, because you need different perspectives. Because it was really interesting to see, out of like a whole, a majority of girls were there, but the user, I think, more than half of the user personas were actually male. So that it was really interesting to see like what our defaults were. So that's why it's really key to have people of different perspectives and experiences, like Dorothy said, in these rooms, so that you can think of different people and how the solution would affect them. So that's a really awesome way to approach this as well. Like, think of your user, like focus on a person or a group of people. And then like one of my questions or one of the things I posed at the end was that, well, people that are different from this group that you've chosen, like they are going to react to your product in a different way. So like, how do you address that? So this process is iterative. It's not, you can't go through it once. The whole idea is to go through it again and again and continue to improve. And that's the beautiful part about it.
So we could talk for hours about this, but we're not going to, because the students want to get going with stuff, but you can reach out to any of us on Slack and we'll continue to have this conversation. We'll hop onto a Slack call and we can have this conversation with your team. But Lisa, before you go, I just want to take things on another note, completely different. You mentioned that sometimes it's just like you're up until 2 a.m. scrolling on Instagram or whatever. So what are you scrolling these days? What is like your go-to on Instagram or TikTok at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep?
Red Panda videos.
Red Panda videos, that is a good one. You know, the Toronto Zoo has not had enough Adira or Paprika or Suva content recently.
You know this painting? This was
Yes.
made by Adira.
I know.
This was made by Red Panda.
Red Pandas are back at the STEMathon. We talk about them every year, it seems. Mahak, what are you scrolling at 2 a.m. these days?
Ooh, I think just like anything, honestly, anything that can help me procrastinate and not stay on track, I will take it.
So
Yeah, but mhm.
for me, last night I couldn't sleep, and so I was scrolling TikTok, and it was just the new Lizzo song every time. And I was trying to learn how to do the helicopter hands because like I need to work on. Can you do those, Mahak? Do you know how to do them?
This is giving me flashbacks to our first year at the STEMathon.
My Bellissieses, and then you do the
Yeah, it's like
helicopter
this.
hands.
Wait,
Yeah.
does that mean that tomorrow we're gonna, during the award ceremony or the opening ceremony, we can have like a dance off between Mahek and Karthik?
Or a dance together,
think
maybe we can try and do Lizzo's about the same time. Like maybe we can do it. We just can't play the song.
Yeah,
on
we
the
gotta
Twitch
learn
stream.
it.
We can't play the song on the Twitch stream. We'll go to Twitch jail. You know, so
Yeah.
but
Oh.
we'll have to do it silent. This is the helicopter hands. I need to learn how to do them. All right, Lisa, thank you so much. This was super, super informative. And now we're going to be back with another presentation after this word from one of our great STEMathon sponsors, Magna. Hey, we're back. And now, you know, Lisa worked with us about the design process, but after you've come up with your solution, you've got to sell it to the judges. And this is such a valuable skill because it's you'll be doing presentations like this throughout your life, whether it be in job interviews, just casual conversations, you know, but how to give the perfect pitch. So our next speaker is a First Canada alum of Team 1360 Orbit Robotics from Oakville, Ontario, 2017 Dean's List finalist. Wow, that was 5 years ago. Time flies. Mechanical engineering student at McGill University, co-founder of Acrylic Robotics, a Next 36 2021 founder, and current battery manufacturing intern at Tesla, Celeste Nantel. And so Celeste couldn't be here in person with us today because she is busy working away on batteries for Tesla right now in California, which is something that all of you might be doing in just a couple of years. So she's having that amazing internship out there. But she gave us permission to play the video of her presentation from last year on how to give a perfect pitch. And Mahak, you watched this last year, and didn't you think this was super informative?
I think Celeste is a really awesome person to do this presentation because I think like she's still very young, right? Like I think she's a student in university, but also like the experiences that she had that she could really build off of, they were like so new and so current and super relevant. And all of her like pitch competitions, and especially with like Next 36, I think that was super incredible. But I think Celeste is such an amazing storyteller, and her like presentation skills are top notch. So being able to share that with all of us was honestly like super, I think, a really, really valuable experience for anyone who was able to listen to it last year, then everyone who's going to be listening to the presentation today.
Honestly, and this isn't like hyperbole here, there are a lot of presentations out there on how to give a presentation, and I think this is one of the best ones I've ever seen, if not the best. So let's take a look at Celeste's presentation on how to give the perfect pitch.
Hi everyone.
Hello, Celeste. How are you doing on this Saturday morning?
Oh, good. You know, I got awoken by Karthik asking me where I was. So the best way to wake up.
Yeah, it's like an in-person event. Exactly. Where's my game
Exactly. Yeah.
announcer? You know, like we're starting match number 1 right now, you know? So
Yeah, or like, we're at 7:30 meeting, and it's like, oh right. Yeah. Oh, but it's got me reminded of the good old days of getting up really early for competitions.
yeah, well, there's a lot of good things about these virtual events. Well, obviously we missed our in-person one, but the nice thing about like just having to get up 2 minutes before the event starts, that's a nice little bonus right there. Celeste, you were going to talk to us about a very important part of this year's competition. It's about how to give a pitch. So all of our teams, Matt, do you want to explain the pitch process with the judging?
Yeah, so you're going to be spending a total of 8 minutes in your judging room. So there's a 5-minute pitch that you'll be doing with all of your team members, and also a 3-minute question session where the judges will ask them questions. But this pitch is really important because it plays quite a big part in your rubric itself and in the marking process. So I'm really excited to hear more about what Celeste is like, the tips that Celeste is going to give, and hopefully everyone will know how to structure their pitch. And 5 minutes goes by really fast. So
really fast. And the cool thing about the pitch is, well, first of all, your mentor is going to introduce you, and they're going to give like a 30-second introduction to like hype you up and tell everyone how awesome you are. But then you're going to give this pitch to the judges, and Celeste is going to teach you about how to do these pitch. But if your pitch is successful, you'll get a callback interview, and you'll be interviewed again later in the day to figure out who's going to win the prizes. And then the 3 big prize winners, best team overall, best overall project, and best overall pitch, are going to be invited to be at part of the FRC Awards Gala on Tuesday night to present live to the entire FIRST community. And that's going to have a massive audience because we're also going to be handing out the Chairman's Awards and Dean's List Awards for the district on Tuesday. So it's really, really big. But that's why we brought a superstar here today. We have Celeste, who's going to teach you how to give a pitch. Right, Celeste?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, let's do this.
Alrighty. So yeah, let's talk about notes on pitching. I just wanted to say right at the beginning that this is not a pitch, because I'm going to be breaking a lot of the rules or a lot of the guidelines I'm going to be talking about, because this is longer than a pitch. Normally a pitch is like 3 to 5 minutes, and it's really concise. And so you can like do a lot more to like control what you're doing in that 3 to 5 minutes. And that's kind of the stuff I'm going to be talking about. But I just wanted to say that this is not a good example of a pitch because that's not what I'm doing. Next slide, please. So who am I? I guess I'm going to start with this because I'm not a pitching expert. I'm a FIRST alumni that has just gone through like some experiences since I graduated, and that's how I've picked up a lot of my pitching skills. And so I wanted to share with you some of the like tips and strategies that I find that can really elevate it. So to give a bit of context, this is kind of where I've learned it from. So I'm an alumni of Team 1360, Orbit Robotics. I was Dean's List finalist in 2017. As Karthik said, I did also, while doing STEM, I was in 3 musical theater productions in high school. And that really had me thinking about acting and performance, which I incorporate that in my pitch. And I feel like that's added to how I pitch. And now I'm a 3rd-year mechanical engineering undergrad at McGill in Montreal. I started out at McGill being involved with student government and student councils. So I also kind of learned of how to pitch myself and pitch my ideas and my mandates through that. And also was involved with like the Quebec Engineering Games, in which I had the chance to do improv, which also I feel like is a really good skill with pitching, is being able to think on your feet and yes and perform. And that was in French, which was even crazier because it's not my first language. And then I've done a few internships that were really interesting. For example, in biophysics at Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto. I was interfacing embedded devices with electric cars at Geotab in Oakville. And last summer I was designing like haptic devices, so how you feel things in VR, at a startup in Montreal. And so that was really, really interesting. And last spring, I co-founded with a fellow mechanical engineer at McGill, acrylic design and technology, which is an art tech startup building artwork digitization tools and painting automation to allow independent artists to scale their craft, as written. We've been working on this for the past year, balancing it with school and our like own internships that we were doing last summer. And as Karthik said, we're in the Next 36 accelerator, and we were chosen for this program at the beginning of the year. And we're really excited for the next, we've gone a couple 3 months in the program, and now there's some more months to do, and it's really going to ramp up and get us all prepped to pitch a lot more for VCs, venture capitalists, which is going to be a lot of pitching. And I'm really learning a lot from this experience because I'm kind of going in blind and doing this all for the first time. And it does feel like a bit like running an FRC team. Next slide, please. So where do we use pitching? I really think we use pitching all the time, and which is why I think it's a super useful skill. So, I mean, if we're speaking directly, chairman's presentations is a pitch, honestly. And talking to pitch judges, that's also a pitch. And networking with sponsors, you're pitching your team and you're pitching why they should partner with you. In extracurriculars, specifically ones that I did in, or that a lot of people do in university, for example, design teams, you're definitely going to have to pitch your car or your underwater autonomous vehicle or whatever you're working on. Case competitions are a big thing. Having a startup kind of just feels like I'm still in a case competition like 12 months later. So you really get to work on your pitching skills when you do case competitions, when you like present your solution. Hackathons, very similar. Like delegations, for like I'm on the Quebec Engineering Games like McGill delegation, and in student politics, you have to pitch yourself a lot. And also in internships with a lot of you will have to deal with as you go into university, going into job fairs. Every time you approach a recruiter at a booth, you're going to be pitching yourself in 30 seconds. And interviews, it's like a little pitch, even though there's back and forth. Team meetings, you like as the intern, you do kind of want to prove yourself and prove that you can add value. So performing well at team meetings is advantageous. And so learning how to pitch can help with that. And very similarly, like design reviews are also kind of a pitch. And in school, or specifically for engineering, which I'm in, like project presentations, you're pitching there, and even talking to profs and administration, like if you're asking for an extension on a deadline, or you're trying to get into a class that's full, you're going to have to pitch why you deserve that and why you should get that accommodation. And so you're also using those skills there, even though it doesn't really seem like pitching, using it all the time. So pitching is a performance, but it's definitely something that you can all do. And I'm going to kind of break down some of the like granular details that I've picked up, that it's like a little bit more effort, but it can really elevate your pitch and take it from something looking kind of amateur to something looking really professional with just a couple like side things. And I'm going to be going through a bunch of those here. Next slide. Okay, the most important part, in my opinion, for a pitch is establishing the desired narrative. So it's like, from what lens do I want the audience to view my story? Because you can have the control to set that in your pitch, and that should be reflected through the slide deck, through the script, through how you answer questions. The narrative should shine through that so that you're able to leave the audience with the impression that you want. Like, how do I want my audience to feel after the pitch? You can establish that, and you need to strategize to be able to convey that properly. Because yeah, the lasting impression is what matters. And also with a narrative, it allows you to set like only one truth that's being shared externally, because we all know in our FRC teams or in our like robot designs that there's always nuance. It's like, oh, this works this way, but has issues with this. And it's just nuance doesn't translate very well when you're in a 3-minute to 5-minute pitch. It's a lot simpler and like it gets towards the audience a lot easier when there's one truth and like one external narrative about what the team is, or what you're presenting is. When in reality, we all know that our projects and our teams are complex and layered. And it also, having one narrative or one truth, it allows for like cohesiveness between multiple presenters. For example, when I am doing a pitch with my co-founder Chloe, and then we get to the question period, and either of us is going to have to pick up questions, kind of like when judges ask questions in chairman's. We want to make sure that we're both pursuing the same narrative, that we're both doing the same storyline, even though like it's all truth and it's all the like the team and what it is. But though like it's important to choose ahead of time what you want to be saying, because if not, it can really confuse your audience because they don't have the context to understand the nuances about your team or your project that you do. Next slide. Okay, so you want to tether your storyline. And this like very important part of the narrative is you want to be telling a story. You're not just dumping information, you're not just showing something. There's a reason that you're talking about that, and that's your story. So what I tend to use is like you like tether your pitch to an empathetic story and something that even as you're presenting information, you can always tie it back to the original storyline. So for example, that could be like a personal experience. Like I have a friend who's a founder of a new age toothbrush, and how she pitches, she talks about her experience going to the dentist and finding out she has cavities and learning from her dentist that most people actually brush their teeth incorrectly. And was the inspiration for her startup. But like, that's kind of the story that's like the intro, and that familiarizes and conceptual, like really makes it tangible for your audience what you're talking about. Also, like a commonly experienced incident can be the storyline that you're tethering your proposition to, your pitch to. Like there's a startup, Cheaper Eats, in the Montreal community, and their pitch is awesome because they walk you through going into a restaurant, you're eating your meal, you have to pay, and then you're like, you don't want to have to wait for the bill to come to you, and then you sign it, and then it goes back, and then you're free to go. It's not a frictionless process. And you're able to feel as the audience how you're right, that is not a frictionless process, because they walk you through an experience that a lot of us have gone through and can personally tie in our head what it means. And it allows them to convey the information of their pitch in a way that really relates more to the audience, and that like makes sense because of their pre-existing experiences. Or the one that we use as acrylic is the story of imaginary archetypal characters. This one is, it's like you still get to establish an empathetic storyline because by like establishing names and backgrounds of your characters, and it makes it people first. It's like a people first approach, and how your proposal or your pitch can help someone. And so if you're not talking about a personal experience, you're not talking about a commonly experienced incident, then you're able to relate it to these archetypal characters. So at Acrylic, we use Ella and Simon. Ella is the independent artist, and Simon is a art buyer on a budget. And we talk about our value proposition from their perspectives and how we can help them, even though Ella and Simon are just imaginary and they're just vehicles for us to talk about our value proposition. Next slide, please. So embedding required info into your storyline. This is part of like not dumping your info and having it all look like it's part of the same cohesive story that you're presenting. So you don't really want stuff that looks out of place. It should, and that's kind of like how you structure the order of your slides and the information you're presenting to make it smooth. And I guess some really like granular things that I found that can help is when you're dealing with boring information that you need to present, you can stick with the user perspective and present it from the user perspective, because it makes it more like relatable or accessible for the audience to understand. So for example, talking about the competitive landscape for why your proposition, how your proposition compares to existing things on the market or existing solutions to your problem. It's saying the pros and cons from the user perspective, relating it to how this will be used and how this will impact people. And for example, if you're going through a financial model of your proposition or of your solution, you can walk through an early adopter's typical transaction, so that it's like it makes sense to the audience, and it's not just kind of like numbers, and it's not abstract. It's really tangible to a person first experience. Next slide, please. Cohesive visual telling, big thing. I mean, I have black text on white slides, which is, I guess, cohesive, but you would want to have this a lot more branded on your pitch. And the brand and the visuals really set the narrative for visual learners, because someone might not really remember any of what you said during your pitch, but they might remember how your slides looked. And I have a lot of times where I remember how the slides look, but I don't really remember the voice of the presenter or the words they were saying. So the colors and shapes you use really reflect the emotions that the story projects. So like, I mean, I guess an example is if you were doing like a mental health or meditation app, maybe you wouldn't use red as your brand color, because it's not a color that's like calming or reflective. It's just red gives a very different emotional response than blue or indigo could, and that does contribute to how your story comes across towards your audience. And also like using visual proofs to support your claims and enrich your story. So I guess if you're doing a presentation about like the outreach events your team's done, you would want photos from those events. And even if you're not pointing out the photos during your speaking, just having them up there is like visual like proof and visual like support towards what you're saying. Or for example, like for a startup, it might be like you have a visual proof of like a prototype you might have done. And even if you don't talk about the prototype, just having a photo of it on the screen indicates that this is being like worked through and the technical viability is being assessed. And this is very granular, but it does actually make a difference. Having brand continuity through inconsistent visuals. So the visuals that we use on our acrylic pitch to talk about Ella and Simon are kind of just like open source graphics that we found of human characters, but we wanted to maintain like a consistent narrative and like have a consistent story, even though we're using all these different graphics. So we like made all of the Ellas have purple hair. And so that's how all of the small like girl characters became Ella, is because they all have purple hair. Or for Simon, they all have a blue beard. And that's how we're able to take all of these like similar looking graphics and have them part of the same story. And I mean, this is really quick, but like if you're using graphs and stuff, you can still have that be on brand with your color scheme. And you don't even need to go and fix your color scheme directly in Excel or wherever you're making your graphs. On Google Drive, you can literally just like tint the asset, and you can change the color of the graph and make it match more with your branding. And it's super fast, but it makes a difference for like continuity. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. Okay, so your whole pitch is leading up to your ask, your call to action, or your desired takeaway. The story should naturally convince the audience of the desired takeaway even before you reach it, just because of the story is like convincing of your narrative. The narrative is kind of like the context which leads to the takeaway. And yeah, the reason is already being narrative. I narrated, as I said on the slide. And it's like the ask, how it should be positioned in your storyline. It's like it's like, oh, we did this, and then this allows us to bring this value to this set of people. And this is how we're doing it so far. This is what we're working on. And it's like, it's the missing piece in the story that you've built is the ask, which is how the audience is a part of your story now, because you're reaching out to them and you're saying, oh, we need $15,000 or whatever you're asking for. Or we would love to win the chairman's award. Whatever it is, it's like that's part of it's part of your story, and it's like it naturally brings the audience into playing a part and helping you complete the story through, and that makes them want to do your ask or make them want to internalize the takeaway, even if it's just informative. Next slide, please. All right, write a script. I used to not want to write a script and think that I was totally fine and I could do improv and I was fine on my feet. And that might have been the case when I was like peaking at my social interaction in like, honestly, 2017 when I was doing when I was doing Dean's List, because I had my whole portfolio in my head and I knew how to answer the questions and bring an example in and tie it all together. Now I don't talk to other people. I'm in quarantine and I pitch, and I even struggle just to answer questions after a pitch. So I really do recommend writing a script, because maybe you think that like you can be fine on your feet, but maybe you're having a bad day, maybe you're tired that day, and you don't want that to be reflected in the words and the enthusiasm that you use, when you can set that ahead of time in your script. So, I mean, yeah, it ensures you're using the right words. I'm very particular about the words that we use to represent acrylic, because it shapes the external narrative that we're doing. Yeah, the narrative to be communicated, you can really establish that and make sure it's communicated by writing a script and reading it over and getting it proofread and being like, does this tell the story that I want? Does this communicate the truth that I am sharing externally? And it ensures the flow between the different slides and between different presenters. It can be hard to like hand off presenting when you're doing it with other people in front of other people, but when it's set in the slides, it's perfect. And it locks in your confident wording ahead of the presentation, which kind of goes with what I was saying earlier, where you might not be feeling it when you're actually presenting it, but that shouldn't change the narrative and that shouldn't change the energy that you've chosen. And so you can lock that in by just using those energetic words or using the words that are in line with your narrative in your script. And so you're going to get that across because it's in the script. And a big thing is it helps you test and maintain time restraints. Yeah, time restraints. All the time, we write a script and it's a minute over like a 3-minute pitch, which is a lot of cutting we need to do to get the excess content out. And it's a lot easier to do that when you have a script and you can test it and time it and go again, test it, time it, go again, than just hoping that you're going to be within the 3 minutes, because more than once I've been in situations where they cut you off at 3 minutes, which is really not a good experience. And it doesn't allow you to end your story as you want. It doesn't allow you to get to your takeaway and complete the story with the audience. It's not a great way to perform. And this is in like in class and schools, they cut you off, which is unfortunate. And also when you're like pitching your startup, for example, they cut you off. So it is pretty common. So a script can really fix all these problems, even though I'm like, I don't need to do a script, but it really ensures quality in your presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, iterate your slides. This is, I mean, kind of a no-brainer, but I like, sometimes I do the slides first and then I make the script. Sometimes I write a script, I write my story, and then I make slides to match. Either approach is fine, but once you have both, once you have drafts of both, you're going to want to be going between them and iterating, because you want to avoid irrelevant visuals. I used to sometimes just add photos of stuff that was like kind of related to give context. That doesn't fly. I wouldn't do that now. Or you can't get away with it as easily now, because all the visuals should directly contribute to your narrative and directly contribute to getting your audience on board with your ask. And getting rid of redundant text is also a big thing. Like there shouldn't really be full sentences unless it's the only sentence on the slide. Also, you'll see if you're saying exactly what's on the slide in your script, then you don't need it on the slide. You can say it in the script. And there is something to be said with if you have too much text on your visuals, then people are going to be reading the text on your visuals and not listening to you. And the text is up to interpretation from the audience. But what you're saying and how you say it, you have a lot more control about with how it's interpreted by the audience when it's actually coming out of your mouth instead of someone reading the text in their head. And yeah, less text is better than more. That's like always true in my opinion. And you can also like break up your slides to have larger words or larger sentences to have more of an impact, and get larger visuals. Like if you're squeezing multiple photos in and trying to get them as big as possible to fit around the words, like I have been there, it's time to just take the actual important visuals and give them their own slide. And maybe you flip slides halfway through the like paragraph or what you're saying, or even you duplicate the slide and then you have your large visual between the duplicates. So it just looks like you're talking about the things in your slide, and then you're showing the large visual that you want, and then you're back on the same slide, even though it's just like a duplicate. And it's just good for continuity, and allows you to kind of talk about a large visual in the middle of a slide instead of having to have that at the end of your slide. You know, maybe that's not the storyline that you want to go over in that specific slide. Let info breathe so the important parts sink in. Yeah, I kind of talked a bit about that before, like having like one big sentence on a slide or like one big factoid on a slide allows it to breathe and have it more impact on your audience. And consistent branding, I guess that's another, just like as you're iterating your slides and really cleaning it up, you're going to want to look for when your fonts are inconsistent, it's not good. If your sizing is inconsistent, it's not good. If your what do you call it? Your indent is slightly larger on some slides and slightly larger and smaller on other slides, you're going to see that when you click through. And it's like, although this is little details, and I wouldn't sweat it because it is the 20% of the year, and you want to put more of your effort or 80%. If you are like really finessing this and really trying to make it perfect, those things can make a difference, even just subconsciously for your audience to see the consistent branding. Next slide, please. All right, pitch delivery, last and the most important in my opinion. I'd say definitely practice, because you don't want to go up there and do your pitch and be like, oh, that wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, because that was avoidable if you practiced it and realize that, oh, I don't like the way that this sentence comes out, or I don't like the way that we present this slide. This slide might look weak in our narrative. And you're able to figure that all out when you practice more than once, especially with your presenters. Don't rush. Always take your time, and when you're nervous, you're going to naturally speak faster. I probably have been speaking way too fast this whole presentation. But sometimes I'm doing a 3-minute pitch and the script barely fits in 3 minutes. So I will talk very quickly to get through it. Is it the best approach? No, but sometimes you need to, because the script is all together and you're crunched on time before when you have to present. Sometimes that happens. And sometimes I'm just like, okay, I'm going to make this script work, but I'm going to have to speak very quickly to get through it. And that's just part of it. And practicing that can help. Okay, this is very technical, but I actually think it makes a difference. Using your chest voice instead of your head voice. So especially female identifying folk, a lot of our voice is coming out of our head, and that's where the sound is vibrating. This is a bit of like theater technique. Because a lot of our vocal range is in our head, and it means that the sound that we're doing is a lot more constricted. It's a lot more nasally. It's not as loud. So I'm trying to like put a lot of my voice back up in my head to give an example. While if you're actually transitioning your voice to be a lot more in your chest and it's vibrating in your chest cavity, there's a lot more support to your voice. And also just like especially in male dominant spaces, they're all speaking with their chest voice. It just comes out a lot louder and a lot more confident, honestly. And being able to, I guess, use your chest and use your volume, even if you're staying at the same like loudness, but it's just a fuller sound. It can deliver differently when you're pitching. It can make you feel a lot more confident, take up a lot more space in the room, which you want to be doing. You do not want to be minimizing the space you're taking in the room, just by changing that. And I guess like specifically if you all want to try this right now for fun, is like switching your breathing from, instead of, you don't want your shoulders going up and down because that's all tight and it's all up in your neck, which is not where you want your voice to be. But stomach breathing, where your stomach comes out, allows your voice to go a lot more into your chest, and allows it allows it to like vibrate in this much larger acoustic cavity. Stand, that's another thing. I actually don't have a standing setup in my apartment right now, which is unfortunate, and I'm pitching looking down, which also isn't great. But some of the best pitchers I've seen in COVID times are people that do it on Zoom while standing up. It's just way more dynamic. You've got a lot more energy, and it does help how your acoustics are vibrating when you're speaking. It's a lot easier to get it into your chest when you're standing. Okay, engage and report, and don't read. Even when you're following a script and you're reading a script, you're gonna want to make these sentences dynamic, and it's like you're reporting kind of a bit like a news anchor and engaging with the audience, even if you can't see them. Like I can't see any of you. So some of the things that I've found to help make it more natural is some hand movements, a bit, not too much. It can just give a bit of, especially when we're just a little square on a screen, having a bit of movement can draw eyes towards your screen and make it a bit more engaging. Eyebrow raises, head tilts, you're like lean your chest or stuff like that. That can all just give it a bit more dynamic feel. Smile, I mean, that one's really obvious, but also I fail to do it when I'm presenting. And it really can help, and especially if you're answering a question you're not sure about, it's like can give you a bit of space to kind of figure out what you want to say. And move your eyes. I sometimes I struggle with maintaining eye contact when I'm having a conversation with someone sometimes, because I'm thinking about how many times I need to blink, like, but luckily on Zoom, it's a bit less direct, but also it can be weird to be staring into a camera the whole time. So I actually look around when I pitch, and I don't know if that actually makes it a better pitch or if it makes it more distracting for the audience, because I'm not always looking at the camera. But for me, at least, it gives me a bit of space to breathe, of just kind of what I'm looking at and what I'm thinking at when I'm not always looking at the screen or I'm not always looking at the camera. And like just looking to the side for a sec can give my brain a bit of time for the wheels to turn, for me to figure out what I'm about to do next. For example, when I'm like answering questions, which I have to think on my feet about, I can give you a bit of a breath, a bit of a moment. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so I mean, if you didn't hear any of that, the most important thing is that you've got this, and that you all have the power to pitch well. And it's just about experimenting, iterating, seeing what takes, and getting feedback after your pitch is actually really important. It can be embarrassing to ask for, how did we do after you present? And like, you don't want to get roasted, but honestly, getting feedback is the easiest way to make your pitch better over time, because you're going to be doing a lot of pitches, and some of them are not going to be good. Some of them are going to be better. And you just want to be collecting that data so that you can get better over time. And it can take years. Don't stress about it. You're going to have lots of opportunities to use this to its full potential. Yeah.
Thank you, Celeste. Okay, that was amazing. There's a lot of information. I was like taking notes through it, and so I have like things I want to talk about here, and I think it's really important. So Number one, we actually have a lot of people with theater and vocal backgrounds who are participating in the STEMathon today. So I think it was really cool that you showed that your background in those areas are so beneficial for what you do. And I remember when you became a game announcer for First Canada, that was one of the things that, when I was talking to you about doing this job, I was like, oh yeah, you're a singer in theater and you're good in front of crowds. But I love just the breathing talk. These are things that you can be used in so many different ways, right, Celeste?
Yeah, and it feels really weird to be rethinking about how I'm breathing, but it actually, like I'm like doing it right now. It can really make a difference for how your sound comes out and also just how your body looks and how it's structured. This, I guess I didn't talk about this in my pitch, but what I really find useful is thinking about this bone right here, and I want to turn it up. It's not about like moving your shoulders back. It's just turning this bone upwards, which puts your shoulders back and sets you all up and gets your neck on top of your spine and gets all the voice going where you want it to go. I know that's very granular, but I do find it is helpful.
It is helpful. It's the same old trick, like, use your diaphragm, not your throat, like project, project, project. You talked about
Mhm.
how details matter. And I think this is one that a lot of people miss because a lot of people are like, it's like, oh, I don't need to line this up. They don't think that way. And no one's going to look at your pitch and be like, oh, it's not lined up, I'm not going to give them the money. But it subconsciously has an effect. Like when you have random font size changes, or,
Mm.
like everything's organized, but one thing isn't, or, one bullet point off. Those little details truly do matter. And you obviously have to get the big details solved first, but the little ones matter. So I thought there was a neat connection between your presentation and Lisa's presentation. Lisa's
Yeah.
presentation, a lot of it was focused on answering the question, what's the problem we're trying to solve? When you're designing something, it's easy to lose track. And when teams are working on their projects this week, it's going to be this weekend, you have to go back to what's the problem we're trying to solve. And I think with giving a pitch, it's what's the narrative we're trying to send. And that's the strategic design of the pitch, right? It's like you have to identify the narrative that you're trying to get across and make sure everything is supporting that narrative.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
For
And like,
sure.
but to me, it's just like that comes back to building a robot, because when you're building a robot, for those of you who are involved in FIRST, you're trying to answer the question, how are we going to win the most messages, or how are we going to win the turn? And it comes back to that. And so like having this singular point, like to me, like that was so insightful, Celeste, because I hadn't thought of it like that, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah, and like you just totally reminded me of 2017. We had a low ball output and spent all this effort and all this like metal and volume in our robot on an indexing system of balls to go into the low goal, which we used 0 times in competition. So it just like wasn't good it wasn't good like commitment to the narrative and commitment to the actual problem, I guess, which is get the most points as possible on the field. And yeah, and I like that's a great link to R&D because, or to brainstorming, because it's very easy to get like distracted by opportunities of cool things to design or cool problems to solve, but it's not necessarily the problem that we're trying to solve and that actually gets us points or that actually gets us the next meeting if we're thinking about this in pitching.
So a question I have for you, Celeste, when you're giving a pitch, do you try and do research on your audience to kind of tailor things to their skill set?
I should, and that is the best way to do it. I actually like, I mean, I'm gonna admit that I lack at that, and sometimes I just go in without knowing, and it's bad, and it always doesn't go well because the people ask a question and I'm not sure in what lens to use when I answer it, because I don't know the pre-existing perspective that they have coming in to see my content and see the narrative that I'm doing, and being able to cater your answers to what people know. And you can find out all that online. You can search up who you're going to be presenting in front of. It's just like it's also part of showing you did your homework, which people really appreciate. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I think there's
Yeah.
like there's a valuable skill here. And like perhaps we talked about this when you were getting ready for one of your scholarship interviews. It's about, so if you don't know who it is and you're going in, without that advanced knowledge, it's reading the room. And this is a really hard skill to develop. You have to do it really quickly because you don't have much time. but reading the rule room based on other cues that you have to try and figure out. And as you're pitching, watch their eyes, see what they're interested in, and then know where to focus on. It's like, oh, I've caught someone's attention here, and it's like I now have to reel that person in. And so reading the room is a super valuable skill because, you know, when you understand your audience, like one of the big things is, Celeste, you talked about, telling the story and walking it through. And when you walk someone through a story, there's two different paths you could take. You can take an emotional path or you can take a numerical path. And different people respond to those things very differently. But some people who like the numerical path do not want to hear the emotional path. And some people who like the emotional path have no interest in the numerical path. But if you can figure that out, oh, you are set. So
Yeah, yeah. It like I just like you said, I sometimes I see on Zoom when people react or when they move when a particular slide is up, and I'm like, okay, interesting. I have to figure out why that slide triggered that reaction. And also if it's a good reaction or a bad reaction, like also gives me information about what I need to change or what I need to emphasize more. And also, I guess like sometimes the questions you get at the end of your pitch can be very indicative of where your pitch needs work. Because if they're asking questions and you're like, why don't you understand that? It's because you didn't do a good job at communicating it. So, and it's always not the audience's fault when they don't get it. It's the presenter's fault for not communicating it or catering it for their lens.
that's fabulous. Celeste, we do have to go because everyone's super excited about the theme, but this was a fabulous presentation. It was a fabulous presentation. Thank you so much, Celeste. It was really worth seeing that one again. Heck, I've watched this presentation like 5 times and each time I gain like an extra nugget out of it. And maybe that just shows I don't pay enough attention. Maybe I should have gotten the nugget the first time around, but it's just, I think the parts about, reading the room and understanding, and then setting your narrative. It's not about just figuring out what you're going to say. You want to figure out what's the message you want them to hear. And when you're presenting your solutions to the judges, it's a little bit simpler. The message you want them to hear is our solution is deserving of the best overall award, and how can you, you're going to line things up with the rubric to figure out the criteria, but you want to get that message like, yeah, our solution is effective. Our solution is feasible. Our solution is well researched, and our solution is going to benefit both us and society, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Celeste does like a really great job at sort of letting you know that you do have control over practically everything when you're pitching. So making sure that you're able to like play on that control and really understand both like your audience and then how they're feeling and being able to share that across your entire pitch or presentation. And I think I also liked how Celeste mentioned just like making sure that your branding and those like smaller things that sometimes we might overlook, like even like the indenting on one text and what your slides look like and what these like visuals, yeah, exactly, like that you're using. I think like sometimes even for myself, I'm like, oh, like, they're gonna listen to me talk, or like it doesn't matter as much, but I think it really helps tie everything together. So like smaller things make big impact. Well, yeah, big impact sometimes. So that was really interesting to hear too.
Details really do matter because as humans, like we process a small amount of information consciously and then a lot of information subconsciously. Like, anyone who's talked about machine learning and stuff, humans are machine learning engines. We just process things and we don't realize we're processing it, and they impact the decisions that we make. And the little details matter in that stuff. Like Mahak, last night, we were even like looking through some of the slides of this, and then our branding expert, Aiden Monder, of the planning committee, is like, oh, I should change this, I should fix this, because he cares about those details and he knows how much they matter. So there's a lot to be learned in there. I hope you enjoyed that presentation. But Mahak, I think it's almost time. We're a little bit early here, but if we're a little bit early, that means everyone's going to get more time to work on their projects. So maybe we do this theme launch, but we'll do that. How about we come back in like 15 seconds? Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. So 2 years ago, Mahak, our theme was education into the future, right?
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
last year, our theme was accessibility.
Accessibility.
Yes,
Yeah.
accessibility. So, there's it's things that are important to our society and have kind of a big picture realm. And so now we're getting into this year's theme. And our planning committee spent a lot of time, like a few weeks, trying to figure out what would be the right theme. What theme would be relatable for the students and have an impact. And I'm really excited about this one. I think there's a lot we can say. I don't know. I don't want to give it away just yet, but what do or do we just want to show it off, Mahak, and then we'll talk about it because it'll just be easier because we don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, maybe we can show it off. I think that then we can actually let all of our feelings and emotions out.
All right, everyone, we're a little bit early here, but we've been tuning in for all of this. It's time for our theme launch. So, without any further ado, let's take a look at the theme for this year's First Canada STEMathon Girls and Allies 2022. Let's do this.
How dare you say we're past the 59th minute? Look at our stores, they're filled with stuff. Look at our people, we're living longer, we're healthier. How dare you say that? I say it without apology. We have created the illusion that everything is all right by using up the rightful legacy of our children and our grandchildren. So what then at this moment is the challenge? Slow down. Get to know each other. Think about our children and grandchildren and ask what we're going to leave them. And then get on with the most important part. We have to reimagine the future.
There you have it. Sustainability. The future starts now. I talk about this one a lot, Mahak, but our world is faced with a lot of big problems. And we look where we're heading. Our world is changing rapidly and it's moving at an unsustainable pace. Climate change, excessive production, consumerism. How can we, but at the same time, we enjoy the lifestyles that we're living right now. And we want to be able to continue that lifestyle. And even so, we want to bring that lifestyle to more people to, have access to opportunities, technology. But there's a cost for all these things. And we've seen that in terms of fossil fuels. So how do we make the technologies that we so love and are enhancing life more sustainable? Or do we have to revisit some of these technologies to find out if they are actually enhancing things? But how do we reconcile our lifestyle of consumption with sustainability? Is it reconcilable, or what can we do? And there is just a world of possibility here of solutions.
Yeah, I think sustainability is very relevant and also I think extremely important. And I really love the themes that we have for the STEMathon throughout for the past 2 years as well. I think they help us think a bit more about maybe some of these feelings and thoughts that we have when we think about what our future is going to look like. And so we might think about what our future looks like for ourselves, but also what our future looks like for the world. So I think, yeah, sustainability and just being able to look at sustainability from different perspectives, not just your own or what you envision sustainability to be, is really impactful. And trying to consider maybe some of those groups that aren't represented as much and making sure that you include ED&I into those solutions, because that is a part of the judges rubric. And you are awarded scores for that.
And it's not sustainability if it's sustainability for all. It can't be a solution that makes sense. But I think it's important maybe when just to help teams start off with their brainstorming, just to think about inequity in all of this. For example, there's things that we take for granted in our lives. The things where but aren't actually sustainable. I own the amount of clothing I have and shoes and Jordans and whatever. And this is part of my lifestyle or whatever. But that, there's people out there who don't have access to these things. We spend billions and billions and billions of dollars on feeding our pets every year in North America. But there's people in North America and across the globe who don't have access to food. The food insecurity is such a huge problem. How do we make sure that our industries are sustainable so that we can reduce some of this inequity? There's a lot of thoughts. It's a very broad topic, and don't feel, you can explore any part of sustainability. That's what's really neat here, where we didn't want to, if we kind of pigeonhole it with a very direct sort of theme, then all the projects end up kind of being the same. And we definitely don't want that. So explore, like, what can you do to make this world more sustainable? It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to fix the entire planet. It might be like a very small sliver of something. It's like, I've always been concerned about shoelace production. How can we make shoelaces more sustainable? That could be a thing. I don't know if anyone's actually concerned about the sustainability of shoelaces or whatever, but it could be something as narrow as that, or maybe you want to talk bigger picture about, like, how can we ensure that sustainability is taught in schools? I don't know. There's so many options. I don't want to give away like ideas here, but this is like the brainstorming generation process. But I think it's important now that folks get together with their teams, start brainstorming, and figure out what problem you want to solve. So identify the problem is step one. You maybe think about a bunch of different ones, and then go into step two, which is trying to solve your problem. Once you've defined your problem statement, go through these processes and start working away. I believe in the handbook this year, which we'll talk more about the handbook in a second, there is a sample timeline of how you should be working along in your teams. I think that's really, really important so you can manage your time well. But Mahak, what's happening now is there is all teams are going to get together with their teams and their mentors in Slack and start working away. There's two channels you should be paying a lot of attention to: Help Pitch and Help Project, where if you have questions about your project, post them in Help Project. All the mentors will be reading there and can jump in there. Help Pitch, same sort of deal. You want help on your pitch, you can jump in at that spot. If you want to get access to a certain mentor, just tag them and they will be right there for you. You might be wondering, well, how am I going to find out which mentor I want to talk to? Our handbook has all that information, right, Mahak?
Yeah, our handbook is, all the links are available on Slack. Also, if you search up where's the handbook on Slack, we have a Slack bot that can tell you where it is. And it's linked to Notion, which is a platform that we're using. But on there, you can see a lot of information relating to both the mentors, what their area of expertise are, their biographies, and then also a lot of the judging material and resources and some of the workshops that we've compiled. So you'll get the slide deck from Lisa, including Celeste's video as well, and then also some additional resources. Something that we thought about when we were initially brainstorming what we wanted this year's theme to be was sort of building off the Sustainable Development Goals by the UN. So I think that's probably an awesome place to start if you're thinking of narrowing down your sustainability a little bit. But a lot of that information is available on Notion, and you can both find it in your emails that sent out earlier, and then also on Slack. The Slack will be your main resource to find everything.
And remember, work with your mentors, but not just the mentor on your own team. Every team needs to consult at least one other mentor to just make sure you're broadening your horizons. And I say consult as many as you can, because there's so much expertise out there. A reminder for our mentors: there's a Gracious Professionalism Award this year, but it'll be mentors nominating students. So we'll get the form out to the mentors there, but make sure you do that. The deadline for that is going to be tomorrow morning at 7:30. Which is also the deadline for everything. So your slides, your infographic, anything else you're going to want to submit by 7:30 a.m. so the judges have some time to review that. Instructions on how to submit are in the handbook in Notion. That's going to be the answer to so much of these things, and then you're just going to be like, where's the handbook? And then Slackbot's going to tell you where it is. Judging tomorrow starts at 8:30 a.m. The judges schedule, Mahak, where would they find the judges schedule?
In the handbook.
In the handbook right there. So
Yep.
Take a look at that. Each team is getting a 10-minute slot that'll allow for the 30 to 60-second hype speech by the mentors. That, remember, mentors, you have to hype up your team before for the judge. You've got to tell them how awesome your team is, because like if I was mentoring a Mahak's team, I'd be like, this is Mahakathon. She is a TikTok superstar. She is winner of the Don Bosley Leadership and Innovation Scholarship, the TD Scholarship, Systems Design at University of Waterloo, and was on ESPN with me 6 years ago. So it's kind of a big deal. So that's like a hype speech right there. Don't you feel hyped up, Mahak? Oh no, I lost your audio. Or I can't hear you, Mahak. I can't hear you. people hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
And now I can hear you. I was like, whoa, what happened there? Lost you for a
Oh,
second.
sorry about that. But no, I think that's an awesome tech speech. Just gonna clip that from clip and
Send it
send
to
it to
your
all the
co-op
recruiters.
applications and the such. But
Yes.
then you're going to give a 5-minute presentation. It's short, folks, so you got to be really efficient with your time here. And there'll be about 2 to 3 minutes of questions from the judges. So that's how that's going to go. This year, there are no callback interviews. I know in our little speech with Celeste, it was from last year, so there was some details that have changed. There are no callback interviews. Every team's going to be interviewed once, and that's it. And the judges will make a decision based on that. And then we've talked about the prizes. There's, those Chromebooks, the Fujifilm Instamax, the Fitbit charges, lots of cool stuff that you're competing for here. And so we're going to see how this goes. And then tomorrow morning, also, judging starts at 8:30. But around 11 o'clock, there's going to be some activities going on. A Zoom link is being added to the handbook right now, so you can take a look at that. But there's going to be a scavenger hunt, which is a lot of fun, where there's First Canada swag prizes. And you'll be playing Gartic Phone, virtual breakout rooms, and some first trivia. So you're going to want to do that for 11. We will be back live here tomorrow at 1 p.m. for our closing and awards ceremony right here on Twitch. So lots of things are happening. If you have any questions, post them away in Slack. Your mentors are there to help you out. The planning committee is there to help you out. And it's going to be a lot of fun. But folks, I don't want to, take up any more of your time. Have fun with the theme. Have fun coming up with solutions. And I can't wait to see all the activity. I'm just like, whoa, I just looked at Slack right now. It's lit up like a Christmas tree. All the team channels are going right now. So this is going to be so much fun. Girls and Allies STEMathon. Hey, also, if anyone has any accessibility accommodations, anything that you need to make this experience better for you, reach out to your mentor or reach out to one of the planning committee members, and we'll do what we can to make sure this works for you. So folks, have a good time. Enjoy the STEMathon, and we will see you back here for various things. But we'll see all of you in Slack. Talk to you soon, everyone. Bye.
Hi, everyone.